Few monarchs in history have inspired as much fascination, pity and controversy as Mary, Queen of Scots. Her life was filled with drama, from her glittering youth in the French court to her disastrous rule in Scotland and then tragic execution in England. For centuries she has been romanticised as a doomed heroine, a victim of politics and circumstance, betrayed by those around her and undone by her cousin Elizabeth I. Yet, when we strip away the legends, one conclusion stands out. Mary, Queen of Scots, was, in many ways, one of history's worst queens. Not because she was evil or cruel, but because she was disastrously unsuited to rule. Her life and reign reveal a monarch undone by poor judgment, reckless passion and political naivety, while others, from Elizabeth I to Catherine de' Medici, navigated the dangerous politics of the 16th century with cunning and survival instincts. Mary seemed to stumble from one catastrophe to another, turning every advantage she had into a liability. Mary Stuart was born in 1542 at Linlithgow Palace to James V of Scotland and his French wife, Mary of Guise. Within 6 days, her father was dead, leaving the infant Mary as queen of a fractious and war-torn kingdom. It was an unenviable start. Scotland in the 16th century was a violent land, divided by clan rivalries, Protestant reformers and pro-English nobles who longed for stability. Her childhood was spent in France, far away from these realities. At the French court, she was pampered and adored, raised alongside the royal children and treated more as a princess than a queen. She was clever, attractive, fluent in several languages and deeply Catholic. When she married the French Dauphin, the future Francis II, at just 15, she became not only Queen of Scots, but Queen Consort of France. At this point, Mary's future looked dazzling, but the problem was that she never learnt how to rule. She learned etiquette, poetry and courtly manners, but nothing of the hard pragmatism or diplomacy required to govern a divided kingdom like Scotland. Her French education created in her a sense of entitlement and romantic idealism that simply did not translate to Scottish politics. When Francis II died in 1560, Mary, just 18 years old, was widowed and forced to return to Scotland, a land she barely knew and whose people she did not understand. When Mary arrived back in Scotland in 1561, she was met with suspicion. Scotland had undergone a dramatic transformation during her absence. Protestant reformers led by John Knox had stripped Catholicism of its former dominance. Mary, a devout Catholic queen, returning to rule a now Protestant nation, was instantly out of step with her people. Rather than adapting, Mary tried to balance the two sides, but her strategy pleased no one. She refused to attend Protestant services, yet promised tolerance. She maintained her private Catholic masses, angering the reformers, and she surrounded herself with Catholic advisers, alarming her Protestant nobles. Her half-brother, James Stuart, the Earl of Moray, who had governed in her absence, quickly became alienated. Mary's charm initially won her some goodwill, but she lacked political sense. Unlike Elizabeth I, who carefully managed her image and courtiers, Mary allowed her personal emotions to rule her political life. She made alliances based on affection rather than calculation, and in doing so, she set in motion her downfall. In 1565, Mary made one of the most disastrous marriage choices in royal history. She wed Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, her first cousin. On paper, it seemed a clever match. He was of royal blood and shared her Catholic faith, but Darnley was vain, arrogant, and unstable. At first, Mary was infatuated, but the relationship deteriorated rapidly. Darnley wanted to be crowned king in his own right, and when Mary refused, he turned against her. Their marriage became a scandalous public spectacle, filled with drunken rages, jealous accusations, and humiliations. Then came one of the darkest moments in Mary's reign. In March of 1566, Darnley, with a group of nobles, stormed into Mary's private chambers at Holyrood Palace and murdered her Italian secretary, David Rizzio. Before her eyes, Rizzio was stabbed more than 50 times, his body dragged through the corridors. The episode shocked Europe, but Mary's reaction was equally astonishing. She forgave Darnley within months and continued to share his bed. When she later gave birth to their son, the future James VI and I, many wondered if she did so merely to secure the succession before ridding herself of her husband. Her inability to manage Darnley politically or personally was a catastrophic failure. Elizabeth I, faced with similar male ego, knew how to play the part of the untouchable virgin queen. Mary, by contrast, seemed emotionally entangled in every bad decision she made. By early 1567, Mary's marriage to Darnley had collapsed entirely. Darnley was living apart at a house called Kirk O'Field in Edinburgh when one February night the building exploded. Darnley's body was found nearby, strangled, not burned. Suspicion instantly fell on James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell, one of Mary's closest allies, and some said her lover, and within weeks Mary married Bothwell, shocking the nation. Whether she was coerced into the marriage or complicit remains debated, but her timing was disastrous. The Scottish nobles were outraged. They accused her of murdering her husband and marrying his killer. Armed rebellion erupted almost immediately, and within months Mary was defeated at the Battle of Carberry Hill and imprisoned in Lochleven Castle. There she was forced to abdicate in favour of her son James. Bothwell fled, was captured in Denmark, and then spent the rest of his life insane in prison. It was an extraordinary fall and largely self-inflicted. Mary had turned public opinion completely against herself. In just 5 years as an adult ruler, she had destroyed her credibility, alienated her nobles, and lost her throne. After escaping Lochleven in 1568, Mary fled to England, believing that her cousin Elizabeth I would help restore her to power. It was a fatal miscalculation. Elizabeth saw Mary not as a victim, but as a rival claimant to the English throne, and for the next 19 years, Mary lived under various forms of house arrest, writing endless letters and conspiring within Catholic supporters to regain her crown. Instead of accepting her circumstances, she involved herself in plots and intrigues, including the Babington plot of 1586, a plan to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary on the throne. When the letters implicating her were discovered, Elizabeth finally signed Mary's death warrant, and on the 8th of February 1587, Mary was executed at Fotheringhay Castle, aged 44. Even in death, she managed to turn a political defeat into a martyr's image, calm, dignified, wearing a crimson gown, symbolising Catholic martyrdom, but history's sympathy for her should not obscure the truth. Mary's execution was the direct result of her own endless plotting and lack of political restraint. So, why was Mary such a poor monarch? There are several clear reasons. 1. She let emotion overrule reason. Mary was guided more by her heart than her head. Her choice of husbands, both Darnley and Bothwell, were driven by attraction and impulsiveness, not political sense. In a world where queens had to be shrewd and cautious, she was neither. 2. She misunderstood power. Mary never learnt that power in the 16th century was built on control, alliances, and perception. She failed to manage her nobles, underestimated her enemies, and refused to see that her behaviour undermined her authority. 3. She could not separate the personal from the political. Her reign was dominated by scandal, lovers, murderers, and betrayals. In contrast, Elizabeth I's strength lay her ability to maintain the illusion of chastity and control. Mary's emotional entanglements made her appear reckless and unfit to rule. 4. She was out of touch with her people. Mary returned to Scotland as a foreigner, French in manner, Catholic in faith, and alien to the rough, pragmatic politics of her homeland. She surrounded herself with foreign advisers and failed to grasp the religious tensions tearing Scotland apart. And 5. She was easily manipulated. From Darnley and Bothwell to her supposed allies abroad, Mary was constantly used by those around her. She never developed the political instincts that allowed other monarchs to survive. Her charisma and beauty masked a dangerous naivety. After her death, Mary's story became a legend, a tragic queen destroyed by cruelty and injustice. Poets, artists and filmmakers have painted her as a beautiful martyr, a victim of Elizabeth's jealousy and England's ruthlessness, but this romantic myth ignores her own responsibility. Mary's downfall was not solely the work of her enemies. It was the inevitable outcome of her own decisions. She was not executed because she was innocent, but because she was dangerous, a queen who could not stop plotting. In the brutal world of the 16th century politics, survival required cold calculation. Elizabeth I survived by mastering control, secrecy and restraint. Mary had none of these qualities. She was born into power, but lacked the temperament to wield it. By the time Mary fled Scotland, the nation was fractured beyond repair. Her abdication left the throne to her infant son, James VI, who would later unite the crowns of Scotland and England, ironically achieving the very union Mary dreamed of, but only because she was removed from power. Under Mary's rule, Scotland saw little stability, almost constant intrigue, and a deepening of religious division. Her reign produced no major reforms, no economic achievements, and no enduring political successes. Her only lasting legacy was her son, and even that came at the cost of her throne. In purely political terms, few monarchs in history have failed so completely. Mary, Queen of Scots, was undoubtedly one of the most fascinating women of her time. Her courage in facing death, her grace under pressure, and her tragic life made her an icon. But these qualities do not make her a good ruler. A great queen must be more than charming or tragic. She must be wise, decisive, and politically astute. Mary was none of these things. She mistook romance for politics, passion for strength, and self-pity for virtue. Her reign in Scotland was a sequence of blunders that ended not in triumph but in imprisonment and death. Her decisions destabilised her kingdom, alienated her people, and handed victories to her enemies. History may remember her kindly, but the record speaks for itself. Mary, Queen of Scots, was not merely unlucky, she was disastrously incompetent. In the end, Mary's life reads like a Shakespearean tragedy, beautiful, dramatic, but doomed from the start. She was born into power she could not control, and every choice she made deepened her downfall. Had she been born a noblewoman, her romantic nature and charm might have made her beloved. But as a queen, these traits were fatal. She ruled by feeling rather than foresight, by impulse rather than intellect, and her execution at Fotheringhay did not destroy a great ruler, it ended the long decline of one of the least effective monarchs in British history. For all her beauty and grace, Mary, Queen of Scots, was history's worst queen, not because she was cruel or wicked, but because she was fatally unsuited to the crown that she wore. Thank you for watching. And to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.